All right, so I think we have all the technology working. Knock on, there's no wood around. Knock on for Micah. Oh, there's Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, I want to say I'm sorry I'm late. My computer decided it was going to do the updates, those forced updates that they make you do where they turn your computer off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on.
Yeah.
Okay. So
I
yes,
hear you.
I am here. I'm down the hill, but I am here.
Okay.
So
Okay, excellent. You are welcome. Yes. Else coming in. Excuse me. Okay. All right, so welcome back, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. So I just wanted to start out with reviewing what exactly we're doing today. We're going to finish up chapter 2. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way. I don't know if you have plans or not. I have no plans. In fact, my husband this morning was washing dishes. First thing he said was Happy Valentine's Day, and I had completely forgotten. So it's like, oh, yeah, Happy Valentine's Day. So we'll finish up chapter 2 today. You do have assignments due tonight. So today we're gonna go through. I've got my list here of the things we still have to talk about in chapter 2. So we're going to talk about salaried, non-exempt calculations for overtime. Okay, so these are individuals who are they're paid a salary, but based upon their job classification, like maybe they're not administrative professional, they're not a creative, they're not one of those, they don't fit one of those categories that we talked about for individuals who would be exempt. So they're due overtime when they work over 40 hours in a week, but it creates some calculation issues because here we've got a salaried person. How do we calculate their overtime? And as you probably already know, if you've worked on some of the homework, which hopefully you have, because there's a lot of homework, that there are different ways of doing that, right? So we have like 3 different ways of doing it. In all of those ways, we have to use the overtime premium approach. So we can't use that ordinary common approach of times 1.5. We've got to use the 0.5. So we're going to go through those calculations, those 3 calculations today. So in those 3 separate calculations really only apply to people who have what we call a fluctuating work week. So it means like one week they work 20 hours, the next week they work 60 hours, and then 30 hours. They're all over the place. They don't really have any set number of hours that they're working every week. So there are 3 different ways of doing those calculations, and we're going to go through them. And we're going to talk about piece rate. So individuals who are paid on a piece rate basis, most of them would be entitled to overtime over 40 hours in a week. But here we're paying them based on the number of units they're producing. How do we figure out, well, what that rate is for over 40 hours in a week? And there are 2 ways to do that. The piece rate's not quite as complicated as that fluctuating work week calculation. And we're going to talk about some incentive plans and commissions and how we add those to our regular rate. And we're going to finish up by talking about bonuses. There are a couple different types of bonuses, discretionary bonuses and non-discretionary bonuses, which, if there's no overtime involved, that's pretty easy to calculate. You just add the bonus, right? But if you've got somebody who has worked overtime during that period that they earned the bonus, then in some instances, we have to include that bonus in the calculation of our overtime rate. And in some instances, we don't do that. So we've got 2 different ways of doing that. So any questions before we get started? I'm also hoping to have some time to go over some homework problems. So I may be kind of zipping through some of this stuff so that I can get to your homework problems as well. Any questions before we get started? Any of those things? No? Okay, out any of my virtual students' questions? Okay, I will take that as a no. Oh, yeah, Tammy, go ahead.
I was wondering, can you explain travel time? I got confused. Are they required to pay travel time if they're going?
Yeah, if it's part of the workday, then yes, that would be included in hours that have to be paid. If it's just commuting, like you're driving from home to the work site, and even if that work site is a different site for the day, then that is not included as travel time. But say you're an accountant and you've got clients spread out about town. If you are driving to see those clients during the day, that time that you spend traveling is included as travel time. It would also be included if, say, you're going to a conference, something like that. Even like the airplane time on the airplane would be included as if you're flying somewhere, would be included as travel time as well. Does that help to clarify?
Yeah, there was a question. If for instance, I live in Early, and say we had an office in Des Moines and then we had an office in Fort Dodge. If I was required to be in the office in Des Moines, that's not considered travel time because that's considered commute time. Okay.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. Even if your commute is 6 hours long, it's still commute time. Yeah. All right. Okay, so let's get started here. And I think this is kind of a little bit of review. I believe we ended up talking about this salaried non-exempt employees. Now, these are people who have, in this example, it's just a regular work schedule. They're not fluctuating, right? So they're not all over the place. They may work overtime here and there, but it's not like their hours are varying very much from week to week. Did you have a question, Ken?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say if I have a like employee who's a waiter, right?
Okay.
And then working as also like a kitchen part, do I do like the rolling acts doing like the
So
same
like which rate are we using? Remember, I think there were 3 ways of doing that, right? And as long as it's clear to the employee which way you're using, you could blend the rates, and we had that calculation for those 2 blended rates. So it's kind of like an average of the 2 rates, and then you base the overtime on that. Or you could keep track of which specific hours they were working in overtime. So for example, if they worked all of the hours while they were washing dishes, then you would use whatever that rate is and calculate the overtime based on that. Or you could just automatically give them the higher rate. So whichever is, and not keep track of when they worked which hours, but just automatically, okay, well, you're making $12 an hour as a dishwasher and $10 an hour as a, give you the overtime at the $12 an hour. Does that make sense? Was that your question too? Okay.
So you just add the 2 hours together and then divide it by like.
Yeah, so that was the blended, the average rate, which if you want to, we can kind of go back through that a little bit after we get through this stuff if you still have questions on doing that. But there were the 3 ways that you could do that. Okay. So salaried not exempt, again, these are people who have standard work hours. And if you recall, we had, and I posted this, where are we here? Okay, I lost there we are. You guys remember this? I've got this posted up on Blackboard. We've got these steps that we have to take. Annualizing the salary, calculating the weekly gross, and you'll see in this example, we've got kind of 2 steps for calculating that weekly gross. From that week, once we've got the weekly, calculate the hourly pay. So we're going to divide that weekly gross by however many hours are standard. The example we have here is somebody who's working 35 hours rather than 40 hours a week. So if they're working 32 hours a week, and that's their standard, we would divide it by 32 hours. And this here, we're trying to figure out what their hourly pay is, what it comes down to, and using that as our overtime rate. Then we calculate the overtime rate based on that hourly pay, and then we're going to add those 2 together. Okay. Oh, sorry. I thought I booted everybody out. I apologize. Get back here, and we'll look at this, our example, based on those steps. Okay. So here we've got Felicia, non-exempt. She gets paid $1,600 a month, but she's working 35 hours a week. So she's not working 40 hours a week, but she may have times when she's working over 40 hours in a week. Now, keep in mind, between 35 and 40 hours a week, she doesn't have to get paid overtime, because she's still under 40 hours a week. Now, her employer could choose to pay her overtime. That's fine. They can do that, but they're not required to. So that between 35 and 40 hours, we're still going to pay her at her regular hourly rate. But once she reaches 40 hours, then she's going to get that overtime, okay? But she would still have to be paid the extra, right? Because she's contracted to work 35 hours. So if she worked 38 hours, we'd still need to pay her for 3 extra hours, right? If she had worked those 3 extras. So, okay, 35 hours a week, paid semi-monthly, which is how often is that? Twice a month, right? Calculated, overtime is calculated as regular hourly pay between 35 and 40 hours per week. So this is how they worded this is a little bit funny. What they're saying actually is this is how we calculate the overtime rate. We figure out what that hourly rate would be for those hours between 35 and 40, and then we're going to use that as our base for calculating overtime. 1.5 after 40 hours. Of 16 hours of overtime in one pay period, 6 of those hours are over 40 hours a week. Okay, so she did work. I know it's a little bit funny how they've worded this. Accountants aren't the best at language. Sometimes I don't know if you've noticed that. So this means that she worked 16 hours during a pay period, a semi-monthly pay period. She worked 16 hours more than her contracted rate, her contracted hours. So her contracted hours are 35. She worked 16 hours more than that 35 per week. But not all of those, obviously, we've got those hours between 35 and 40 that are going to be paid at her regular rate, right? So
46 will be extra, right?
So 6 will be extra, will be overtime. Because, so it says, of the 16 hours of, and they really shouldn't, it's very confusing when they call it overtime because it's over her contracted rate, but it's not all of it is technically overtime. It's not going to be paid at an overtime rate, right? So 16 hours more than her normal 35 hours a week during this pay period. But remember, it's a semi-monthly pay period. So we're talking about probably 15 days within that pay period. Might be 2 weeks exactly, might be 2 weeks in a day. We don't know exactly. But 16 of those 16 hours, 6 of them were over 40 hours. So maybe she worked 43 hours and 43 hours, right? For those 5 hours, she's just getting paid at the regular rate. The additional 3 hours in each of those weeks, she's getting paid overtime at an overtime rate. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's do the calculations here. All right. So we're going to annualize her salary. Remember that was step one. And then we've got to figure out how much she makes on a weekly basis. So she's paid $1,600 a month times 12 months, $19,200 annually. And then, like I had mentioned, the second step in that list is 2 lines here in this particular calculation. So we're figuring out what her semi-monthly gross is, although, yeah, we need this actually in order to do the last step. So we figure out what her semi-monthly gross is, which means that if she just worked her 35 hours a week, that's what she'd be getting. The $800 for her twice a month is what she would be getting. So we're going to figure out her weekly rate by taking the annual amount divided by 52 weeks. So she makes $369.23 per week. This is how we calculate out her regular rate. Now you'll notice we're dividing it by 35. We're not dividing it by 40 because that 35 is what she's contracted to work, right? Anything more than that, she's going to get paid extra for it. So we want to make sure we're only dividing it by the number of hours she's contracted for. Her regular rate is $10.55 an hour, and then we can use that to calculate her overtime rate. Now, remember, 10 hours additional were at her regular rate. 6 hours additional were at the overtime rate. Now we're going to add all of that together. So her regular semi-monthly gross plus the amount over and above her contracted hours up to 40 hours was paid at $10.55, plus 6 hours were paid at overtime. We're going to add all of those together. So this time she gets $1,000.48 for her gross. So there's 3 parts there, right? Because we've got just her regular pay, and then any hours over what she's contracted, but under 40 hours a week, and then hours over 40 hours a week. We're going to add all those together. Does that make sense? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm a little bit problem because I don't understand, because 16 hours and 35 hours, if you take 35 plus 5 is 40. And over there, somebody put 10 hours.
Because she's working, we're talking about the entire pay period.
No, I'm talking for 35 to 40.
Yeah.
Because she's work week is 35. Work week is 35.
Yes.
So if she's over 40, she make overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have 35 hours to get 40, it's supposed to be 5.
Yes. So that's where and we have to pay her for those extra hours. And that's where we're using this regular rate here.
So I think he was asking like, why isn't like 10.55 times 5 instead of times 10? Because
it's 10 hours total that she worked over. So let me see. Hopefully this one's going to work. So let's just say that her semi-weekly, or not semi-monthly, let's say there was 2 weeks in the week. So like we could look at a calendar here. Oh, let's not do it. Let's do it over here. Maybe not. All right, I don't know how to bring that over. We will have semi-monthly periods that do just include 2 weeks. So for simplicity's sake, let's say that's what we have. So we've got week 1. She worked 43 hours. And week 2, she worked 43 hours. Or let's do it this way, actually. Let's say she worked 35 hours in that first week. And then she worked, let's see, 35 plus 16, 51 in the second week. This week she's going to get, it's just her regular rate. There's no overtime or anything included in that first week. But we're combining these. She gets paid for both of these weeks in one pay period, right? In this pay period, we've got hours, so up to 35. She gets her regular pay, regular salary. From 35 to 40, she gets an regular hourly rate. And then everything over 40, she gets an overtime rate for those hours. So this 35 and this 35 would cover the $800 because this is just what she gets every 2 weeks. The hours though, between 35, did I do this right? 35, you're right. So 35 and 4, well, so they didn't, I do have to do this way because they specified that 10 hours of that was between 35 and 40. So I do have to do this differently. So, because I didn't match their problem. So we'll say 40 hours here and what is 16 hours over 6 of them, 46.
Yeah.
Okay. So the number of hours between 35 and 40 in this week, we had 5 hours that were between 35 and 40. And then we had 5 hours here that were between 35 and 40, right? And then we had 6 hours that were over 40. So here's the 10 hours here. So how I did it originally there is not, I didn't match the problem that they had here. But it's entirely possible that could be the case, in which case she would only get paid the 5 hours at her regular rate, here, 5, and then she'd get paid 11 hours of overtime because she was 11 hours over 40 in that 1 week. Does that make sense?
No, for me, the problems will be for 40 hours. Because if your schedule make 35 hours, it's over 35 hours, you're supposed to make overtime.
No.
So
over 40 hours, you make the overtime rate. Between 35 and 40, you still get paid for it, but at a regular hourly rate.
So if your work on the weekly is 35, and then you work over 35, this one make you supposed to over 40 after you can make overtime.
Yes, you can make over at the overtime rate. You're still going to get paid at the regular hourly rate though for those hours over.
I have like a similar question here, but I'm having a hard time solving it.
Okay,
You can take a look.
One of the homework problems?
Yeah.
Okay, can we?
It's exact similar. I have done it like 50 times. It just doesn't, like, I even tried that process just right now and.
Okay, let's see here then. Let me.
It's number 54.
Number 54. Okay, I'm gonna have to assign it to it.
It's very easy.
Sorry, it takes me several clicks to get there.
Semi-monthly is where it's set up as 2 different, like, days of the month, and bi-monthly is like every other week.
Exactly. So if it's bi-monthly, or bi-weekly, if it's bi-weekly, it's gonna be, you're gonna get paid on the same day. It's just every other week. So like every other Friday or every other Thursday. Semi-monthly, twice a month, that day of the week that you get paid is going to vary. But the date is going to stay the same. So like always on the 15th and the last day of the month, or the first day of the month and the 15th. Those are your pay days. I don't want to do that. Stop. All right. Let's see. It was, which number was it?
54.
54. So others that there's several of you that are having issues with this, it sounds like. This one. Mark. Chapter 2. Okay. So 54. Let's get this out of here. Okay, so let's look at this one. All right, so we got Sheila Williams, medical secretary. She earns $35.75 a month for a 35-hour week. For overtime work, she receives extra pay at the regular hourly rate up to 40 hours and then time and a half for any hours over 40 hours in a week. And she's, okay, semi-monthly pay period. Okay, so same, just different numbers, right? She worked 10 hours of overtime. Only 2 of this overtime were beyond 40 hours in any 1 week. Compute the following amounts. All right, so let's look at the first part here. I don't understand why I can erase some of it and I can't erase others. Okay, so her regular semi-monthly earnings. So remember, we're going to analyze it. So $35.75 per month times 12 is how much?
42,900.
42,900. All right. So on a semi-monthly basis, what her regular rate is 42,900 divided by 24 pays, right? Is
1787.5.
okay. So that should be her, let's see, 17.
Semi-monthly.
Okay. So semi-monthly, 1787.50 should be what our answer is here, right?
Oh, you got 2 8.
Oh, I do. Yep. All right. So cool. 10 hours of overtime, but 2 of them were beyond 40 hours in any 1 week. That means 8 of them were at her regular rate, right? Okay. So we've got to figure out what her regular rate is. So we've got 42,900 divided by 52. 52 weeks.
825.
Oh, 825, sorry. Okay, 825. She regularly works 35 hours a week. So we're going to take that 825 divided by 35 hours. What's that get us?
23.57.
So this is her regular hourly rate. All right, so we're going to take that in order to figure out the second part of this. We're going to take that times 8 hours. Because she worked a total of 10 hours over the 35, but only 2 of them were at that overtime rate. The other 8 were at this rate. So 2357 times 8 is how much?
188.57.
88.57. So again, this is this is our regular rate up to 40 hours. So 188.57.
No, it's not this one. 259.
Oh, is that okay?
Plus the 2 on the hours
23. So how much is this?
is 259.28.
259.28.
Yeah. But this one you get right. But you're supposed to add plus 2 overtime.
Mm-hmm.
So you make this one plus 2.
So what you're going to do is 2357 for our overtime rate.
Yeah.
2357 times
Yeah.
2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, times 1.5.
Yeah.
You get that right, sorry. I'll do it, I mean, you'll get the same answer, but times 2 hours.
Yeah, and you get a 259.28. That's the overtime.
What is it? What is the 2357 times 8?
188.56.
180,
Yeah.
okay, 180, then we need that. 188.57?
56.
Okay. No, sometimes it's rounding. No.
That 188.56 is only for the
Regular.
first 8 hours.
So it's
And then you need the
259.
extra 2 hours.
Oh, so they're wanting you to, okay, so they want to add that to that, okay, okay. And so, well, let's separate this out so that we know for each of them. So this was how much? The 2357 times 1.5 for 2 hours?
70.714.
0.71. We'll assume that, and then, so we're gonna add this and this, 188.56. This is where it comes in,
Get
7.
259.
259.28.
Yeah.
28.
Why are we having 28? Was this round, did this round up to 57?
So this one things. Maybe the second one is wrong.
So 2357 times 8. 188.56. Okay, that's not rounded. And then the next one is 2357 times 1.5. 35. Okay, this is when we get something like this, then we've got to look and read very carefully what the instructions are. Do we round it now or do we round it at the end? That just depends on what they ask you to do. So round all divisions to 2 decimal points. Okay, and use the rounded amounts. Okay, so now we're going to round it at this point. So it's 35.36 is our overtime rate. So we want to use that. 35.36 times 2 hours, 70.72.
And that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. What, they're rounding it or? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So 259.28?
Yeah.
Gotcha. There we go. And then total earnings, we're just going to add those two together.
2000.
One question. How we know that we need to add the regular hours and the overtime hours in order to get the overtime earnings?
Well, because again, I don't like the wording on how they did this,
Yeah.
but let's see. I guess if you got the wrong answer, then you could try that. Really. I mean, it's, are they saying the 2 hours? Are they saying the whole 10 hours?
I think just by
For me.
overtime, it's more than what they
Ordinarily
normally
work. Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could word it differently. You could certainly word it differently than that. So 1787. 1787.
2000. 046.
204,678.
Yeah.
There you go. But during the assessment, we cannot do that.
Sure. Oh, you
try
can't.
again and
Yeah. Well, but I don't know if you've noticed, the assessment questions aren't as involved as that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We haven't started yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't personally.
So how did you get to the 2000?
Add the two together.
Okay.
Total earnings. Okay. That helpful? The wording is difficult because overtime in this means anything over the regular hours. But to us, it's, well, that's over 40 hours, but not really. So I wish they would just say, you know, hours over contracted rate, but that's a mouthful.
Do you mind if I take a bigger?
No, go right ahead. Yeah. Yep. Okay. That helped. That, any other questions on that one?
The 56.
Number 56, is it a similar question? If it's a similar question, you might want to, where did I go here? Oh. 56, we'll take a look at 56, but if it's similar, then just use the same, kind of the same steps. Kenneth is a salaried employee, works a 37.5-hour week, paid a weekly salary of $675. His salary is to cover all hours worked up to and including 40. This week he worked, okay, so this is actually the next, so in this case, that 675 is, okay, so he's non-exempt, works, trying to see what they said here.
Was paid 7.20.
Yeah, 37.5. Agreement that he has with his employer states that his salary is to cover all hours worked up to and including 40. This week he worked 42 hours. Calculate his gross pay. Okay, so let's use this as an example here. Agreement that his salary covers all with the exception of hours over 40. Worked 43 hours. So we would take his regular pay, divide it by the 37.5 to get his hourly rate. And then we're going to use that, multiply it by 1.5, and we're going to take the hours, the 2 hours over overtime that he worked. And then we're going to add those two together. Does that make sense? It is a little bit different than the other one. I will agree. Why is this going away? Go away.
7.29. 7.29 cost.
729?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, use this as a guide. In our case, it's going to be the 675 instead of the 1080 divided by 37.5 hours to get that rate per hour. Use that to figure out the overtime rate. And then only the 2 hours, he's only going to get paid for the 2 hours of overtime because his agreement is that this 675 is going to cover him up to those 40 hours. Normally he only works 37.5, but if and you know, it's kind of a bummer for him because now he's working more but not getting paid anymore. But they are legally required to pay him overtime over those 40 hours. Make sense? Daniel, does that help? Okay. But that one's a little bit different because he's not getting paid between 37.5 and 40 hours because he agreed to that. It just means his hourly rate, as long as his hourly rate doesn't go below minimum wage. If it went below minimum wage, then we would have a problem. They would have to pay him extra to get him up above minimum wage.
So you take 675 divided by 37.5, right?
To get his hourly rate. All right. So let's, okay. So we've got these, now we're talking about a fluctuating work week where we've got hours that are all over the place. Okay. There are two basic ways that this is done, but then as you know, there's this third way called that BELO plan, which I get more questions about the BELO plan than any other questions in this class. Understandably so. But we're going to talk about the first two ways first because the BELO plan can only be used in very specific circumstances. This has to be, as long as the employer-employee agree on how it's going to be calculated, that's fine. Right? With the BELO plan, there are some other very specific guidelines that have to be followed. The basic difference between these two plans is what you're dividing by. The first one, you're going to divide it by, and again, we're calculating overtime at this point. That's what we need to know the calculation for overtime. In the first one, we're going to divide our normal salary by the total hours that were worked in that pay period. So if it was 35 this week, then we're going to divide it by 35. If it was 52, then we're going to divide it by 52. So that means that this is going to change every pay period. And we're going to then add an extra 0.5 overtime premium. Again, we're going to use the overtime premium method for these. For all hours worked over 40 in that pay period. The second one, and we'll do some examples here. Get this out of here. The second one, instead of dividing by the total hours that were worked, we're just going to divide it by 40 hours. We're just going to use that as our hourly rate to figure out overtime. So do they give us examples here? No, they don't. Okay, so we need to find some example. Well, actually, I have an example up in the in Blackboard. Let's focus on these two plans first. So one of them we're going to divide by total hours. The other one we're just going to divide by 40 hours in order to get that overtime premium rate. All right. Hopefully everybody out there can see this. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Okay, there's two examples here. The first one divided by the total number of hours. The second one, we're dividing it by 40 hours. So in this example, we've got $35,000 salary. 45 hours were worked. Let's see, do I have a, put down how much do I have? This is just weekly, I think. I just have a weekly pay. So in the first one, we're going to take the 35,000 divided by 52 to figure out how much per week is their regular rate. Then we're going to take that amount and divide it by the total number of hours that were actually worked. Divided by 45. 46 or $14.96 is their regular hourly rate in this pay period. Next pay period, if they work 42 hours, then that regular rate is going to be different. Multiply that by the 0.5 for the overtime premium. So they get $7.48 per hour additional for those hours over, for those 5 hours of overtime. So $7.48 times 5 hours of overtime, their overtime premium is $37.40. We're going to add that $37.40 to the $673.08. Their total pay under this first method is $710.48. Make sure everybody can see this. $710.48. Now, in the second method, we're going to, instead of dividing by 45, we're going to divide by 40. You can see it makes the hourly rate higher. Instead of $14.96 an hour, now it's $16.83 per hour. We're going to use that $16.83, that's our overtime premium, times the number of, okay, so our overtime premium is now $8.42 per hour. Multiply that by the 5 hours of overtime. To get $42.10, we're going to add that then to the $673.08 for the total pay of $715.18. Let me see if we can find an example in your, do you guys have an example in your homework? Was that?
A lot of example.
A lot of, okay.
Yeah, I'm getting it. So it's easy.
But the main difference, yeah, the difference between those two is just what you divide it by to get that hourly rate.
Excuse me, sir. The problem is for hours. It's the same weekly, on the weekly amount, but the hour, because if you stay in overtime premium, it's supposed to be over 40. for the second math, it's supposed to be 40. That's supposed to know, because for overtime premium, the hours over 40. But for this case, for the second case, the math say he can start for 40, so he stay 40, and then he can get the same number.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the overtime is saying the same things. You can add a 0.5 for the first one and the second one, it's still the same. But for the hours, that's be different, because I'm learning, I'm seeing the problem. Everything's the same, man. The hour, that's hours. The second one might say over 45, over 40, and the second one is supposed to start for 40.
Okay,
Yeah, that's work week sheet I'm trying to understand.
let's see. Yeah, Vince.
Let me see.
So in that first one, it's salary divided by number of payments in the year.
To get, and in this case, it was a weekly, yeah.
Right. And then you take that and divide it by the hours you worked that week.
To get the hourly rate,
Okay.
yes, yeah. So however, all right. So do you guys have
The 58 mentions the Bureau plan.
the BELO plan? Is there one that we haven't covered the BELO plan yet? We'll get, I'll do that one. But was there a problem that does either one of these? Or was it only the, let's see, 50, did we just do 56? We did just do 56. Oh, okay. So this one is, okay, so the second part of it is the BELO plan example. Okay, so here we've got Carrie Ortiz. Oh, sorry, you can't see that. There we go. A little bit bigger. Oh, maybe too big. Okay, Carrie Ortiz works fluctuating work schedules. Besides her fixed salary of $1,050 per week, employment agreement provides for overtime pay at an extra half rate for hours worked over 40. This week she worked 48 hours. Okay. So let's see. Oh, but here, yeah, they're not saying which one you're using.
So here,
Try both.
so here overtime earning is 87.58, 52.
Okay, so when you did this, I'll ask you, and how did you get this? So you took the 1,050.
Yeah. So here, first of all, you're supposed to know the hours. We have 48 and 40. So
So we don't know which one we're dividing by. You're right. Unless they say something up here in the example. I guess I would just follow what the example does.
no, you take
Oh, the example just has 40
you
hours.
take the 1,050
Mhm.
divide and divide the number for the 48 hours first. That's the first step.
Okay, so they're doing it with the 48 hours.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna take, so this is the first method.
Yeah.
Right, so 1,050 divided by 48 hours. What do we get there?
You get 21,888.88. Yeah.
And it's saying round all divisions, so 0.89, right?
No, 0.88.
0.88.
Yeah, 28.
I got 0.875.
Yeah, you can put one
Yeah.
over there.
Okay,
Round.
0.88.
Yeah.
So that rounds to 2188. All right. And she worked 48 hours. So that 2188 times 0.5, which gets us what, 10, 11,
1094.
1094?
Yep.
Okay, so that's our overtime premium. And she worked 48 hours. So she gets the 1050 for the 40 hours, and then we're going to take the 1094 times 8 hours. which gets us
8752.
87.52, yeah.
okay. So
Let's see. Right.
oops, here we go. 8752.
So this one is 1,001.
Yeah, and then we're gonna add those two together. So 1050 plus 8752 gets us 52,71137.
Yes.
113752. All right. But you're right. I see what you're saying. They don't, let's see, no matter how many hours, all I would say is use the example that they have.
Because if you focus for this example, you can get it because you can have the result.
So divided by 40,
yeah, I suppose this
48, 1540 times 0.57. Well, this is, I mean, this is what we did
Yeah.
right here. Right? Okay, so with a BELO plan, the difference is we're going to use that maximum number of hours, that 53 now. So let me go back to, oh shoot,
1,309.
I lost it. Where is it? There it is. Here's the BELO plan. So in this example, it's 40, it's maximum number of hours is 42, but they worked 45 hours. So 1683, we're still using we're using the hourly rate from this example times 42, the total number of hours. And so our overtime premium of 842 times 2 hours of overtime. Oh, who's got a question? No? Oh, is it blurry? Yeah, I'm sorry. Look, if you can pull that up at all. Is it blurry to everybody? Let me try and zoom in a little bit more. This is on Blackboard, by the way. I don't know if that's helpful. Okay, good. All right. I gotta get back to where I was. All right. So let's get back to this. If this was a BELO plan with a pay rate of $22 per hour, so if we look at this guide, and maximum number of hours of 53. Actually, let me go back to the slide because I want to talk to you about when you can use this BELO plan. Oops. All right. Very irregular work schedule. So we're not talking like 45 hours one week, 35 hours. We're talking, 10 hours one week, 70 hours the next week, nothing all over the place. Deductions cannot be made for non-disciplinary absences. There is a guaranteed compensation, but it cannot be for more than 60 hours. So if it's more than 60 hours, you can't use this BELO plan. So that's where we're talking about the guaranteed compensation, like the, right here. In our example, here, that guaranteed compensation is for 53 hours. That's what they're talking about. Okay. Out of the way. You calculate the salary as the wage rate multiplied by the maximum number of hours and then add 50% of overtime premium for overtime. Again, there has to be an agreement between the employer and the employee. Okay. So our wage rate in this example is $22 an hour, right? So $22 an hour multiplied by the maximum number of hours. Salary, wage rate, maximum number of hours at 50% for overtime. That's not very descriptive. Sorry. I'm going to go back to my thing. Okay. So this would be well, I guess it is, the 1683 times 53 hours. That would be our regular pay. $22 an hour. Get the problem up again. There we go. So the $22 an hour times the 53 hours to get the total pay. Let's see here.
$1166.
Thank you. So this is the regular pay. Now he's going to, this is actually pretty easy because he worked 48 hours, right? He didn't work, he's still going to get the 1166. That's just what he gets. If he worked more than 53 hours, then we would have to calculate that overtime premium. But because he worked up to, he still was under the 48 hours.
No, it's 1309. It's not correct.
Oh, do we do the,
9309. 1309.
what did we do wrong? 22 times 53. 1166. So it says what now? Oh, wait. 1050. What did they do here? Priorities. Plan. Oh, yep.
Don't you have to count that 8 hours at the premium rate over 40?
Yep, you're right. Sorry. We got to add that in anyway. Thank you. All right. So 8 hours. So now we're going to take the 1166 and we're going to, so $22 an hour, the overtime premium rate for that is 11.5, $11 an hour. We're going to multiply that by the 8 hours of overtime. So 88. So 1166 plus 88, 4, 5, 1254. Is that what you got?
No, 1309. That's
What?
1309.
1309. Okay, what am I calculating wrong here then? $22 an hour, maximum hours by the hourly rate. Yeah, add this to 1/2 times the regular rate multiplied by the number of hours over 40.
Yeah, you make mistake here, teacher.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you're supposed to take 13, multiply by 11, because it's only 53. 53 minus 40, you get 13 hours. So 13 hours multiplied by 11, get 143, plus this one, you get the
So
result.
it's 13 hours, but then. By the number of hours over 40.
Yeah. So the maximum is 53.
Yeah, we probably have to count the 53.
As I'm getting, it's right.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to, so this is times 13.
Uh-huh.
So it's 143.
1
43.
and 1166. Okay, I got the number of hours over 40.
I'm guessing that it's not the number of hours worked over 40, it's the number of
Number
hours.
of maximum hours over
The way we
40.
say it.
Okay, I want to verify on my sheet that I have that right because is there another below
Yeah.
example?
Larry things inside.
What's that?
Yeah, Larry, same things inside. That's these things. You can use it, can find it.
Number 59, maybe we can try, yeah.
Sorry, I made it too big here.
Make everything. Today.
Okay. So we've got 1040. Extra half rate, 4 hours over 40. She worked 47 hours. All right. So overtime earnings, again, we're going to take the I'm sorry. Last calculation. Okay. So we're going to take the 1040 divided by the 47 hours, right? 2213 times 0.5, the overtime premium. So 1107 times 7 hours, 7749. Let's see if I'm right. Am I right?
It's not correct. 97.29.
97.29?
Yeah.
All right, what did I do wrong? So 1040 divided by 47. Right?
You're right.
Yeah.
58.
So so 2213 per hour times 7 hours. Do you have a different, sometimes these vary, the problems.
I don't know. This one is not which number?
What?
This exercise.
The 2230, do you have exactly the same? It's 1040?
No, I don't have it on the.
We have 1,029.
That's why. These vary.
It's number 59, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, 59 have 1,059 here.
Okay, it's 1040 up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they vary. So, will we get 2213 times 7? Oh wait, 22, sorry, didn't do the half. Divided by 2, 1107, 7749. Let's see if we got it right. Cross fingers. Yes, okay. So it's just like, yeah. So your numbers are different than my numbers. So 7749 plus 1040. Oops. 111749. Right. So I'm taking the 1040, I'm dividing it by the 47 to get the hourly rate times 0.5 for the overtime premium. And then I'm multiplying the overtime premium by the number of hours of overtime. That's overtime earnings. And then in this one, I'm just adding the 1040 to this number, to my result here. All right, let's look at this. See if we can make a disaster out of this one too. Pay rate, $23.45 an hour, maximum of 47 hours. How much paid for 42 hours? All right. The 1040. Okay. So the 23.45 times 47, right? 1102.15 for the regular hours. And then we've got to figure out what the overtime rate is for those 2 hours. No, for the 7 hours. Yep. All right. So 1102.15, now we've got the overtime premium. Alright. 1102.15, I need to write that down. $102.15. So the 20, what am I doing with the overtime premium? I've drawn a blank. Hold on just a second. I'm gonna look at my sheet. So it's the 23 times 0.5, sorry. I'm in a blank here. So 23.45, 11.73.
Yeah. By 7, it's 82.11.
Times the 7 hours, 47. $82.11 plus the 1102.15. 1184.26. There we go. Okay. So for the BELO plan, what we did was we took the 23.45 times 47. Okay, write that down. And again, your numbers are probably going to be different than mine. So the hourly rate of 23.45 times 47, which we got, what was it, what did I get? 1102.15. Okay, and then we got we took the overtime premium, 23.45 times 0.5 to get 11, what did I get here?
11.75.
7.5? 3, right, 11.73, this is the overtime premium. And then we took the 11.73 times the 7 hours, the 47 for the maximum hours worked, which he's gonna get paid for even though he didn't work them, or she, whoever it is. So 11.73, which we got 77.49. That's how we got the first, I'm sorry. Did I get the right, am I doing this right? I'm mixing these two up. Am I mixing these two up? 11.
The answer is 82.11.
82.11. I got that. I just looked at it wrong. 82.11. Okay. And then we added the two together, right? 1102.15 plus 82.11 gets us the 1184.26. Sorry, looking at the top one there. Okay. Yeah, but
Is there a way we could get the formulas?
formulas.
Like the actual, like this plus this equals what this means?
Well,
Because when it's worded out, it's kind of hard to follow.
this was my best attempt to do that, was this. Now, this is using an example, but if you can kind of insert, so for our purposes, for that problem, it was 23.45 instead of the 16.83 per hour, times the maximum number of hours, which in our case was 47, to arrive at this 1102. And then we figured out the overtime premium times 0.5. Our overtime premium in this case was 1173. And then I multiplied the overtime premium times the 2 hours for the minimum. Now in this example though, there actually is overtime. In our example, because in this example, they worked more than the contracted rate. Is that right?
But not this one before.
In our example, in this problem, it's reversed. Like we had the, so we had to figure out as well, in this one, we're also going to add those 3 extra hours at the overtime rate. Whoops, sorry. I was going to say, I'm glad that's rain and not snow, but I'm not real sure. So this one is slightly different than this one in that this one has an extra piece to it with the additional overtime. So in our examples, these people, they're going to get paid that amount regardless. But if they work more than their contracted rate, they're going to get an overtime amount as well. But their regular rate is already calculating in that overtime. Okay. You know, like I said, the BELO plan, and I have to keep referencing this. Did you have your question?
So like for that one, the maximum hour is like 42 on that one, right?
Maximum hours is 42, but they worked 45. In our example, maximum hours is 47, but they worked 42. Right.
So this one has an extra step of 1.5.
Yes. And where you're that 1.5, now we're adding overtime to it, over and above what their regular rate is. So they're going to get this, if they work up to 42 hours, they work 10 hours, they're going to get the 725.70. If they work 20 hours, they're going to get the 725.70. If they work 42 hours, they're going to get the 725.70. But if they work more than the 42 hours, then we're going to add on the additional hourly rate times 1.5. So in this case, their overtime rate was 25.25. They worked 3 hours at that rate. So we would add then, just like we would do with any other overtime. Stop. Let's do that. All right.
That's not.
It's a lot. It is a lot. Let me go through real, let's see here. I still need to talk about piece rate and overtime. There are 2 different ways to do overtime with piece rate earnings. All right. So with piece rate, remember, we're getting paid per unit produced, inspected, assembled, whatever. When an individual works overtime and they're paid at a piece rate, there are a couple of different ways that we can do it. The first method is to convert their earnings into an hourly rate. So we take the number of units produced times what their piece rate payment is to get what their regular earnings are. Take the regular earnings divided by the total hours that they worked in order to get an hourly rate. So this is how much they made per hour. Then we're going to use that to calculate the overtime rate. Now, this hourly rate has to be at least $7.25 an hour. right? It's got to be at least that minimum wage rate. Add that, or actually, we're going to multiply it by the overtime premium. Whoops. Ooh. There we go. Overtime premium, and then we'll take the regular earnings times plus the overtime amount to get our gross pay. So for example, and I think there are a couple of examples here that we can look at. Second method is we're going to use the piece rate amount as in our calculation of overtime. So if we get paid 10 cents per unit during regular hours and we're there for overtime, we have to also figure out, in this case, we have to figure out how many units were produced in overtime. So kind of like we did when we had two different wage rates, and we had the choice to figure out, okay, at what wage rate were they working in that overtime? In this case, we also have to know how many units were produced in overtime. So you've got to track that. So for example, 1,000 units were produced in regular time, 400 units were produced in overtime. If our regular piece rate amount is 10 cents per unit, multiply that by 1.5, 15 cents per unit. That's what we're going to then use to multiply by the number of units that were produced in overtime. So in this case, we're getting an hourly overtime rate. In this case, we're using a piece rate overtime rate. So they're getting paid 1.5 times for any of those units that they produced. So yeah, Ben.
And the piece rate is predetermined?
Yes.
By employer or
Yep.
contract or something like that?
Yep, exactly. Okay. Exactly. So let's look at a couple of examples here for the first method. So for example here, 4,812 units were inspected in a 47.25-hour work week. So they worked 7.25 hours over regular, over 40. So they've got to get paid overtime for that. How are we going to calculate that overtime rate? If we use the first method, what we're going to do is figure out how much their total earnings were during that week. Multiply total number of units produced times the piece rate amount to get the regular earnings. Then we're going to divide that by the total hours that they worked. That's how we get an hourly rate. So they made $12.22 an hour. Even though they were paid based on piece rate because of how much they produced, they essentially made $12.22 per hour. So obviously you could produce more and you would increase your hourly rate and increase your overtime, right? If they had produced or inspected 5,000, it'd be 5,000 times 12, then the regular earnings would be higher. And so therefore the overtime rate would be higher. Does that make sense? Okay. So take the $12.22 hourly rate times 0.5 for our overtime premium. Now, the 1 for our 1.5 is already included in that rate, right? So that's why we're using the overtime premium here. We only have to add that additional half. Regular earnings plus our overtime calculation to get our total gross pay. So that's basing it on hours of per hour rate for overtime. Method B, and Kathy and I talked about this before class. This can be a little bit confusing because what you've got here is, well, wait, this is 4212. Our total units were 4812. Why is this 4212? Well, they told us 600 of these were worked in overtime. So in our second calculation, we have to know how many units were produced or inspected, whatever, in overtime. And then we extract those, and they're paid at 1.5 times that regular rate on a piece rate basis. So 12 cents per unit is what they're paid. So in overtime, they're going to get 12 cents per unit times 1.5. We're just using the overtime rate for on the per unit basis rather than per hour basis. Going to add those together then. So we'll take the 42.12 that were produced in regular time times the 12 cents, and then take the 600 that were produced in overtime times, what do we have here? Essentially 18 cents per unit is what they're getting there, and add those two together. You get a different result for each of those. Okay. Questions about the piece rate? Okay, so there are a couple of different incentive plans can come in all different shapes and sizes. And they can be really complicated. They can be really simple. It's very important especially if they are complicated, that the employee understand how they are calculated. I was an employee at a firm where as an accountant, as a CPA, I didn't understand how they did the incentive plan. There were so many different factors involved with it. And then they kept changing it as well. And it was not a good thing. So it has to be understandable by everybody. Here's an example of one. So maybe 18 cents, and this is one that's based on based on piece rate. So you get 18 cents if you inspect up to 2,000 units per week. But if you inspect more than that, this rate then goes up, maybe 24 cents per unit if it's between 2001 and 3,500, and then even more if you can inspect more than that. Now, the one thing I don't like about this incentive plan is how good are the inspections that are actually happening. All right, you start to run into quality control issues. So you got to make sure that your incentive plan doesn't sacrifice quality control as well. Commissions, this is where we have a salary and then an additional amount it's usually based on sales. So you get like a percentage in most cases. So here we've got an example. You sold $40,000 of product. His quota is 31.5. So he's going to get a bonus commission because he sold what, $8,500 more. He gets 2% of any excess over his quota. His annual base salary is 30,000. So he's going to get his 30,000 regardless. Chances are he's not going to keep his job if he's not making his quota on a regular basis. If he gets paid biweekly, his gross pay would be the 30,000 divided by 26 because it's 26 pays in a year. That's his base earnings. Calculating out his commission, the 3,500 times 2%. So he gets $170 commission. Then we're just going to add the two together. Okay. That again is to encourage employees to sell more, obviously. One last thing, I do have about 30 seconds left. So bonuses come in two different types, discretionary and non-discretionary. Discretionary bonuses, and what does that mean? So discretionary means, the manager can give out a bonus at any time. There's no predetermined amount. There's no predetermined, you have to do X, Y, Z. It's just, hey, Merry Christmas. We made extra money this year. Here's a bonus. You might not get it next year, right? It's not based on anything that the employee necessarily did. A non-discretionary bonus, however, the employee knows how they have to earn it. They know what they have to do. Maybe it's a safety bonus. Like they go a month without any safety issues, they get an extra $100, that sort of thing. So they've got some control over it. With non-discretionary bonuses, the bonus amount is added to the regular earnings in the calculation of overtime. That means that like if my salary is $1,000 and I earned a $100 non-discretionary bonus, now to calculate my overtime, it's going to be based on that $1,100. For a discretionary bonus, you're not including that in the calculation. It would just be the $1,000 that my overtime rate is based on. Okay? So that's the difference between those two bonuses. I'm not going to go through this, but you can look at it on the slides. Profit sharing plans. That's just if employers offer the opportunity to share in the profits of the company. And usually those can be complicated or they can be simple as well, but the employee needs to know what they consist of. All right, so that was kind of fast and obviously a little discombobulated at times. Let's see here. And I feel a little bad about that. So I'm going to give you a little extra time on your homework. Okay? For those of you who got it done, hey, bonus, you got it done, yay. But I feel kind of bad about the fact that went through really fast. Yeah, like I said, I was having issues with the calculations. So I'll make it due on Thursday night. And on Thursday, I will also, I'll allow you guys to ask any other homework questions on this chapter. Is that, because we didn't really get a whole lot of time to do that. Okay, does that sound fair?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, you're welcome. Sorry, I know, this was, and that's for all of you out there too. So I'll go ahead and extend that.
It wasn't gonna be done tonight.
What's that?
So we can spend our Valentine's night.
Yes, you can go out with your sweetheart.
Are you still going to be around from 1 to 3:30 today?
Yes, I will. Is it pouring rain out? Because I might just stay here.
Oh,
Are
I
you
don't
over in
know.
building 1? No, that's okay.
No, I just, well, I'm going to run down the hall and then come back. So is that okay?
Yep, absolutely.
And there was one person that came online that you didn't see, and I don't know who that was.
Lisa, I pushed the wrong button.
Whoop. Okay.
Sorry.
Yep, you're
I didn't
still
mean to cut you
recording.
off. I was closing out a bunch of windows and I hit the wrong one.
Oh, that's okay. Well, I will stay on here, but I do have to go down the hall first, so I won't come back. I won't ask any questions until 1 o'clock.
Okay, I will. I tell you what, go into then at 1 o'clock, go into the office hours one. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I can get out of here this one then.
Okay, sounds good.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so that's because I don't think anybody else is back. Unless.